Jiyu Yang went hunting on the mountain in a rainstorm, heedless of his own safety, all to buy me a silver hairpin that cost 50 copper coins. Yet that day in the restaurant, I heard him talking and laughing with someone. The crown prince has a set of head ornaments custom-made for the princess, inlaid all over with jadeite and gemstones, 5,000 taels of silver. In total, if that girl finds out, she'll probably hang herself from shame and anger. How long is the prince going to keep up the act? Could it be he really wants to take her into the mansion as a concubine? Jiyu Yang's casual voice rang out. It's just a game, a concubine. She's not worthy. That was when I found out he was the heir to the Marquis of Wuan, not an orphaned hunter with no family. His wedding to the Princess Changle was fast approaching, and he was about to end this charade of being a hunter. But he had no idea I was also ready to leave him. My aunt, who served as a female official in the palace, had secured me a position in the Imperial Embroidery Bureau. In 3 days, I would enter the palace. The night was pitch black. Jiyu Yang clutched a rusted woodcutter's knife, his clothes drenched, and knocked on my door. I threw my arms around him at once, tears falling silently down my cheeks. He gently pushed me away, a smile in his eyes and brows. I told you there'd be no danger. Just go to sleep and rest easy. Stay away from me. Quick, I'm soaked to the bone. What if you fall ill because of me? He tossed a blood-stained sack behind the kitchen stove, changed his clothes, then came back to ruffle my hair. With the rabbit I caught today, I've finally saved up enough money. Tomorrow, when the rain stops, we'll go to the market and buy that silver hairpin. I can't wait to see you wear it. I brought him the hot soup I'd kept warming on the fire, my heart aching. It was all my fault. The other day, I'd spotted an exquisitely crafted silver hairpin in a peddler's basket and stared at it a little too long. Jiyu Yang had noticed. He'd said he was too poor to give me any decent gifts, and insisted on going hunting on the mountain to sell his catch for money. He was dead set on buying that hairpin for me. 50 copper coins, an entire month's living expenses. If we skimped and saved. I waved my hand, disapproving. I only stay home and embroider during the day. No one would even see me wearing a silver hairpin. Besides, it's so expensive. What if I lose it? Jiyu Yang brushed it off, his voice tinged with teasing. You can wear it for me. Besides, what's a little money, if you want it? One day I'll buy you a whole set of head ornaments, one of those 5,000 tael ones covered in gemstones. After he spoke, Jiyu Yang seemed to remember something. His body stiffened for a split second, then relaxed again. I closed my eyes, forcing a faint smile. Really? You can't lie to me. 5,000 taels, a number I'd never even dared to dream of. Yet today, I'd heard it twice. I lived in a 3-room adobe house, all with grey tiles and white walls, dotted with mold spots. Jiyu Yang had moved in next door a year ago, claiming to be a hunter. A heavy rainstorm had collapsed his hut. He'd knocked on my door and begged me to take him in. He was more handsome than the young opera singers in the pear garden, and I'd found myself nodding before I could think. When I came to my senses, my cheeks were burning red. Figuring the house was big enough, I'd cleared out a room for him to stay in. He'd said his ancestors had once been government officials, but the family had long since fallen on hard times. His parents had passed away one after another, leaving him all alone in the world. So when he occasionally said things that didn't fit his supposed station, I just chalked it up to his broad knowledge and never doubted him. In the days that followed, he'd often bring back his hunting spoils for me to steam and boil. We'd eat together, chat together, and before long, affection had bloomed between us. So when he'd said he'd buy me a silver hairpin, my heart had been filled with joy. But the mountains were dangerous, and he'd sometimes come back with injuries. It broke my heart to see him hurt. I'd thrown myself into my embroidery even harder, a sachet that had once taken me half a month to make. I'd stayed up all night with bloodshot eyes and finished in 10 days. Early that morning, I'd rushed to the finest embroidery workshop in the capital. I was haggling with the shopkeeper when Jiyu Yang's voice suddenly drifted in from the door. It was a little novel at first, but the rice jar's full of weevils, and there's a layer of dirt floating on the water. After a while, it's just plain tedious, and I have to pretend to go hunting on the mountain every day. Even scratch up some wounds every now and then. Do you know how much this wound of mine is worth? 50 copper coins. I got hurt just to buy her a shoddy 50 copper hairpin, and she cried tears of gratitude. I froze where I stood, thinking I must have misheard. I didn't even notice the sachet slip from my hand and fall to the ground. After a burst of laughter, someone sighed. Only the young Marquis could come up with such a novel game. None of us ever thought to experience the life of a pauper. From their conversation, I finally learned the truth. Jiyu Yang was no orphaned hunter with no family at all. He was the only son of the Marquis of Wuan, the young Marquis of the mansion. The man went on, sighing. 50 copper coins and she's devoted body and soul. It's laughable. If she finds out the young Marquis had a set of head ornaments custom-made for the princess, 5,000 taels in total, she'll probably hang herself from shame and anger. 5,000 taels. I leaned against the doorframe and caught sight of that pitilessly handsome figure. Gone were Jiyu Yang's tattered patched clothes. He wore an elegant brocade robe that made him look even taller and straighter. He was surrounded by a group of young nobles from prominent families. Joking and bantering with him. Marquis, don't take this game too far. In 3 days, you'll be marrying the Princess Changle. She's a woman who brooks no nonsense. If she finds out you've got such a little thing hidden away outside the mansion, she'll definitely make a scene. I say, if you like her, just take her into the mansion as a concubine. Keeping her outside is risky. If it's discovered, you'll have a hard time explaining it away. Jiyu Yang lowered his head, twirling the jade pendant at his waist, his tone utterly casual. A concubine. She's nothing but a peasant girl who can only embroider and weave cloth. She's not even worthy to be my concubine. It's just a game, that's all. Someone patted Jiyu Yang on the shoulder, advising him, poor mountains breed stubborn folk. Don't get tangled up with her, you'll never shake her off. Jiyu Yang let out a mocking snort. I'll disappear in 3 days, once I'm back in the Marquis mansion. How could she ever find me? Amidst a roar of laughter, he went on. Even if the truth is discovered one day, as long as I deny it, who would believe her words? She has no power, no influence, not a single person to stand up for her. What do I have to fear? I stared at him in a daze. That morning, before he'd left the house, he gently ruffled my hair and told me to wait for him to come back for dinner. He'd said he'd bring me steaming hot lamb buns, and if he sold his catch for a good price, he'd buy me a stick of rock sugar hawthorns too. He'd pounded his chest and said, Arwan, just wait a little longer. Once I save up enough money, I'll marry you and take you into my home. Back then, the tips of his ears had been flushed red. His eyes had been filled with softness when he looked at me. His affection had seemed so real. I'd wanted to rush up to him, demand justice for myself, ask him why he'd toyed with me like this, ask him why he'd lied to me, why he'd deceived my feelings. But when Jiyu Yang cast a casual glance toward the embroidery workshop's door, I ducked behind a shelf. The group of men crowded around Jiyu Yang and left. The shopkeeper picked up the sachet from the ground, brushed off the dust, and asked me, do you still want to sell this sachet? It's a little dirty, I'll give you 3 copper coins less for it. I looked at the sachet, smudged with a little dust, and smiled softly. I'll sell it. Jiyu Yang had no idea that half a month ago, my aunt, the female official in the palace, had sent someone with a message. She'd found me a position in the Imperial Embroidery Bureau. I'd been hesitant at first. Once I entered the palace, it would be hard to ever leave. I'd hated the thought of leaving Jiyu Yang. But now, I could leave on my own terms. Early the next morning, Jiyu Yang woke me up. He slung the rabbit he'd caught the day before over his shoulder and waved at me. Arwan, let's go, we'll sell the rabbit at the morning market. And you can wear that silver hairpin bright and early. Jiyu Yang was wearing a linen shirt covered in patches, with a big hole torn in the back of his shoe. Thinking back to the fine brocade robe I'd seen him in the day before, it was hard to believe the man in front of me was the same person as that noble young Marquis of the Wuan mansion. When Jiyu Yang saw I wasn't moving, he stepped forward with a grin and took my hand. What's wrong? Are you so happy you've gone silly? If I buy you something even nicer someday, how over the moon will you be? I told him to wait a moment, then went to the kitchen and brought out a bowl of thin kanji and some pickled vegetables. No matter how happy you are, you have to eat first, otherwise, you'll never make it through the day. Jiyu Yang raised his eyebrows with a smile, sat down, and began to eat. I picked up a bowl of kanji too, sipping it slowly while stealing glances at him, my eyes roaming over him unobtrusively. Jiyu Yang's posture was far from elegant. He propped one leg up on the stool. When he slurped the kanji into his mouth, he made a loud slurp sound. When he finally set down his bowl, he wiped his mouth with the sleeve of his shirt. The Marquis of Wuan's name was known far and wide. The old Marquis had fought alongside the founding emperor to unify the country, and the family had even produced a concubine of the late emperor. Looking at him now, it was impossible to imagine he'd been born into such a wealthy, prominent family, a family of bells and feasts, of endless prosperity. He'd played the part of a poor man so perfectly. Jiyu Yang noticed my gaze. He touched his face, confused. Is there something on my face? Why are you staring at me so intently, Erwan? I set down my bowl, staring straight into his eyes, and asked, is there something you're hiding from me? I saw a flash of guilt and hesitation cross Jiyu Yang's eyes. He sighed. As if he'd made up his mind about something, he stood up and said solemnly, Erwan, there is something I need to confess to you. I just didn't want to make you sad. I hadn't expected him to be willing to tell me the truth. I lifted my chin, ready to listen to what he had to say, braced myself for whatever it might be, but a sudden, urgent knock sounded at the door. Jiyu Yang and I both tried to ignore the noise outside, but the person knocking was relentless. When no one answered, the man finally shouted loudly from outside, Jiyu, brother Jiyu, are you in there? I have something to discuss with you. How can you not be here at a time like this? Princess Changle is waiting for you at the racecourse on the outskirts of the city. I recognized that voice too. It was the same man who'd crowded around Jiyu Yang the day before, who'd suggested Jiyu Yang take me into the mansion as a concubine. Naturally, Jiyu Yang recognized it too. In an instant, his expression changed. A look of indescribable panic flashed across his face. He strode quickly toward the door, but before he opened it, he turned back to me, forcing an awkward smile. It must be shopkeeper Li from the #1 Scholar restaurant. He spoke in a rush, as if afraid I'd interrupt him. I promised shopkeeper Li I'd go to his place and clean his game for him the other day. I completely forgot. Shopkeeper Li's generous with tips. I could get an extra 20 copper coins. He scratched his head awkwardly, his eyes darting away. But I promised you we'd buy the hairpin today. My heart plummeted at his words. As if struck by a heavy weight, I nodded, lowering my eyes, my voice barely a whisper. Hurry, don't keep shopkeeper Li waiting. I opened my mouth to say more, but Jiyu Yang quickly unlatched the door a crack. The moment he slipped out, it slammed shut behind him with a loud bang. I sat there in a daze, my mind blank. Hadn't he said he was going to confess everything? Why was he so afraid for me to see who was outside? I picked up my bowl. The kanji inside had gone stone cold. I took the last bite of pickled vegetables and chewed slowly, the bitter, sour saltiness clinging to my tongue. My heart, which had been tossed to and fro, finally sank to the bottom of the sea, lost without a trace. I stood up and dragged out the wooden chest from under my bed. Inside was only one silk skirt, bought with gritted teeth for my birthday last year, a dress I'd never had the heart to wear. I ran my fingers over the coarse fabric, unsure what I'd ever hoped for. With the money from selling the sachet, I hired an ox cart. The cart rumbled along at a snail's pace. As I watched the scenery slip slowly by the roadside, my heart grew more and more uneasy. The imperial racecourse on the outskirts of the city was a strictly hierarchical place, where even the family of officials below the 5th rank were turned away, yet I was stubbornly set on getting close. By the time I reached the racecourse, I belatedly realized how impulsive I'd been. I had no time to regret it before someone pulled me inside. A stable hand pointed at the hay on the ground and snapped at me. Newborn colts are delicate. How dare you sneak off to laze about? Do it again, and you won't get a single copper coin of your wages today. I stood there flustered and helpless. This was the nicest, most expensive dress I owned, yet I was still mistaken for a servant at the racecourse. Under the stable hand's glowering gaze, I wordlessly carried hay and mucked out the colt's stalls. The afternoon sun blazed hotter and hotter, sweat streaming down my cheeks. I straightened my aching back and glanced through the fence to see a group of people galloping on fine horses across the track. Each horse had a silk ribbon tied to its ear. They were racing to see who could grab the most. Leading them was a woman in a bright red riding habit, bold and graceful. She held a green ribbon aloft in her hand, digging her heels into her horse's flanks as she twisted around to laugh at the man behind her. Jiyu Yang, this ribbon's mine. The wind whipped her black hair about her face, making her look dazzlingly bright. Jiyu Yang rode close on her heels, his eyes and brows soft with affection. They made the perfect pair, truly. I looked down at my dusty skirt and my hands, smudged with dirt, and let out a bitter laugh at myself. So this was the gulf between us. So I really was not even worthy of being Jiyu Yang's concubine. I could not bear to stay a moment longer. I turned and ran, fleeing this place that had shamed me so deeply. The stable hand who'd shouted at me earlier saw me leaving and hurried after me. He pressed 30 copper coins into my hand, his brow furrowed in confusion. Leaving already? Stay till evening. And we'll feed you too. I took the coins instinctively, fumbling to wipe my hands on my skirt, as if I could wipe away my embarrassment and despair. I forced a smile and thanked him. Surprisingly, the weight of the copper coins in my palm lightened the knot in my chest, if only a little. After leaving the racecourse, I went to the market alone. The market was a bustle of people and noise, peddlers hawking their wares at the top of their lungs. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and pulled out all the copper coins I had, haggling with the peddler until we agreed on a price. In the end, I spent 45 copper coins and bought the silver hairpin. I pinned it in my hair and stared at myself in the mirror, over and over again, until I suddenly burst out laughing. Laughing until tears streamed down my cheeks, unbidden. Jiyu Yang came home very late. I sat in the kitchen, by the embers of the fire, embroidering a sachet carefully. It was a gift for my aunt. A token of my hope for the future, every stitch woven with longing. Jiyu Yang stood there, watching me silently for a long time. The fire flickered, chasing away the chill of the night, and his eyes softened, touched with a hint of tenderness. I thought I must be imagining it. He walked over slowly, his voice low. One. I'm sorry about today. I promise tomorrow I'll go to the market with you. I'll buy that hairpin for you. I swear. He raised his hand. His old habit of ruffling my hair rising to the surface until he saw the silver hairpin in my hair. In the glow of the fire, the pin glinted softly, catching his eye. He froze, dumbfounded and flustered, a look I had never seen on his face before. I lifted my chin slightly, pressing my lips together as I asked him, "Do you like it?" His Adam's apple bobbed. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. In the end, he fled to his room, and as the door clicked shut behind him, I heard a faint, quiet whisper, "I'm sorry." It felt as if a sharp needle had stabbed my heart, but there was no need for apologies. I was going to leave without a word soon enough. I picked up the sachet and went back to embroidering, but my trembling hand betrayed me, the needle slipping again and again, pricking my finger. A drop of blood fell, staining the delicate stitches red. My heart clenched the moment I saw Princess Changle. I dug my nails into my palm, the sharp pain yanking me back to my senses. If only just. Jiyu Yang had left early that morning, not even a word of goodbye. 2 burly palace maids lunged at me, shoving me to my knees. The head ornament on the princess's head was exquisitely luxurious, exactly the one Jiyu Yang had spent 5,000 taels of silver to have custom-made for her. She strode in with an arrogant gait, her eyes sweeping the shabby room in disdain. When she turned to look at me, her lips curled into an unbridled sneer. "So you're the little toy Jiyu Yang's been toying with." I was not surprised she'd found me. I even suspected Jiyu Yang had let her find me on purpose, hoping to use her to get rid of me. This trouble, when I said nothing, she lifted her delicate pearl-encrusted embroidered shoe and kicked my face hard. "You must have some trick up your sleeve." To keep Jiyu Yang entertained for a whole year, her voice was shrill and piercing, echoing in the narrow, dim room. Yesterday, he even tried to hint to me that he wanted to bring a woman back to the mansion. Leiden said you were his wet nurse's daughter, that he felt sorry for you and wanted to give you a way to live. Ridiculous. We aren't even married yet, and his heart's already divided between us. I bit my lower lip, bowing my head so low my chin nearly touched my chest. Princess Changle looked down at me from on high, as if I were nothing but a lowly ant. You don't even know who Jiyu Yang really is, do you? I opened my mouth to defend myself, but one of the maids holding me cut in sharply. Your Highness, this little hussy must know who the young Marquis is. She's probably already climbed into his bed. Princess Changle's eyes narrowed dangerously, her gaze sending a chill down my spine. Check her. The two maids immediately set about tearing at my clothes, rough and brutal. My aunt had told me all girls entering the palace must be examined for their chastity, even the lowliest maidservants, but at that moment, I would rather die than be subjected to this. I struggled with all my might, and just then Jiyu Yang burst in, his forehead covered in sweat. He had not had time to change out of his luxurious brocade robe, the fine fabric glaringly out of place in my shabby home. His face was etched with anxiety and worry. He lifted his foot and kicked one of the maids holding me to the ground. The princess watched Jiyu Yang with a playful glint in her eyes, her voice laced with a warning. What did you promise my father when you accepted the imperial edict of marriage? Have you already forgotten? Jiyu Yang's body swayed slightly, a flash of hesitation and helplessness crossing his face. Under my pleading gaze, he slowly stepped back 2 paces. The princess shot me a mocking look. As if laughing at my overestimation of myself, she pulled out a jade pendant and twirled it in her hand, the very same one I had seen hanging from Jiyu Yang's waist a few days before. If you've never touched her. What are you afraid of? Jiyu Yang sighed and smiled at the princess. I gave you the heirloom jade pendant of the Jiyu family, isn't that proof enough of my heart? You are the only one for me. How could I ever touch another woman? Believe it or not, I have never loved anyone else. I just feel guilty for lying to her, that's all, feel guilty. I clutched my torn lapel, my body shaking uncontrollably. The princess glanced at Jiyu Yang, the corner of her mouth curving up slightly. Then let the examination be done. If she truly never tempted you, I might even let you bring her into the mansion someday. I looked at Jiyu Yang with desperate hope, begging him to stop this. I don't want this, I screamed at the top of my lungs, but my voice sounded so feeble. Jiyu Yang only glanced at me in a hurry before turning his head away. His eyes darted everywhere, refusing to meet mine. Then he nodded at the princess, turned his back on me, and walked out the door, his hands clasped behind his back. Despair erupted in my heart like wild grass, growing unchecked. I hugged myself tightly, helpless and alone, only for the 2 maids to pin me back down on the bed, forcing my legs apart. Shame tore through me, as if my very soul was being ripped to pieces. I cried until I had no more tears left, and only then did they let me go and walk out. I heard the maid who'd accused me of climbing into Jiyu Yang's bed speak in confused surprise. She's still a virgin. Then she immediately fawned over Princess Changle, her voice sycophantic. It seems the young Marquis truly loves you, Your Highness. No matter what seductions this little hussy used, she never won his heart. You have such excellent taste, Your Highness. The young Marquis's self-control is unrivaled in the entire capital. The princess smiled, satisfied. I thought he'd broken his promise to me. It seems I was just being petty. Their voices faded into the distance, leaving me huddled in the corner of the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. That night, Jiyu Yang came home. He did not wear his tattered patched clothes anymore. The fine embroidered threads of his brocade robe glinted with golden light in the dim kitchen fire. He stood by the door, not daring to come closer, his eyes filled with guilt and remorse as he looked at me. Arwan, I was going to tell you. I really was. I said nothing, only stared at him, cold and unblinking. Once, the butcher at the meat stall accosted me, trying to drag me home to be his young wife. Everyone around shrank back, too afraid to step forward. Then Jiyu Yang appeared out of nowhere, shielding me behind him. Later, when he moved in next door, I thought it was fate, arranged by heaven itself. But it was never fate at all. That butcher had looked at me with pity in his eyes. Sadly, my gaze was always on Jiyu Yang, and I never noticed. Now I realize, that whole hero saving the damsel act was nothing more than the opening of the game Jiyu Yang had planned. Jiyu Yang took my silence for a fit of pique. He reached out to ruffle my hair, but I dodged him. He sighed. I know, this time it was the princess's fault, but she is of royal blood, and naturally above others. I promised her I would not touch another woman before I married her. I also know I should not have lied to you. When I first saw you, your clothes were tattered but you smiled so brightly, and I grew curious. Over this past year, my affection for you was real. The princess has agreed. Tomorrow, after we marry, I will take you into the mansion as a concubine." Jiyu Yang wore a look that said, "Are you satisfied now?" and raised his hand to my head again. I shot to my feet, grabbed a bamboo pillow, and smashed it against his arm. Jiyu Yang's eyes widened, he rubbed his swollen arm, and for the first time, his face showed displeasure with me. "Zhao Wan, I am the heir to the Marquis of Wuan. To be my concubine is a blessing you have earned over countless lifetimes." A look of contempt and scorn I had never seen before crossed his face. "Do you really delude yourself into thinking you can be my Marquis's wife?" When he saw tears fall from my eyes, his tone softened again. "Once you enter the Marquis of Wuan's mansion, you must tame this little temper of yours. The princess will be the mistress of the house then, and you will have to learn the rules at her side. No matter how much I like you, I must give her face." "Jiyu Yang," I cut him off before he could go on, choking back the sourness in my nose, and shouted at him, "I will not be your concubine. I will not step foot in your Marquis's mansion, and you must never come here again." Jiyu Yang laughed, as if he had heard something ridiculous. "Everyone in the neighborhood knows we've been living side by side. If you refuse to enter my door, who else would ever marry you?" I never thought I would hear such words from his mouth. I all but screamed. "I was examined, wasn't I? I am pure." Jiyu Yang smiled helplessly and shrugged, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "So you're still upset about what happened today? The Marquis's mansion has this rule too. Even legitimate concubines must be examined before entering the mansion. The princess just did it in advance, so it will save the trouble when you come in." I was so angry, I actually laughed out loud. What was the point of arguing with him? He was a lofty young marquis. How could he possibly understand the feelings of someone like me, a commoner? I wiped the tears from my face and pointed to the door. "It's such a trouble for the young marquis. Coming all the way here to apologize on the eve of his wedding. Hurry back, and don't ruin tomorrow's wedding to the princess." When he saw me smile, Jiyu Yang thought I had come around. "Arwan, you really are the most sensible. Don't worry, when you bear me a child someday, I will promote you to a noble concubine." A noble concubine, he would never live to see it. Watching his retreating figure, I wiped away my last tear. The next day, I dug out the copper coins I had saved over the years from under the kitchen stove, found a cloth, and wrapped them up with a few pieces of clothing. I gave all the things I could not take to Aunt Liu next door. She asked curiously where I was going, and I told her I was going to the neighboring county to join distant relatives. Aunt Liu peered into my room. "If you leave, what about Xiao Yang? Haven't you two had a fight? Young folks bicker, but they make up soon enough. Don't let a small thing hurt your feelings." I touched the silver hairpin in my bun and smiled, shaking my head. He will never come back." With that, I left before Aunt Liu could react, walking toward the alley mouth. There, a carriage with a blue curtain was waiting. My aunt had sent someone to pick me up. The carriage was stuck in a crowd of revelers on Jukyu Avenue. I stepped out of the carriage and asked an aunt who was standing on her tiptoes. The aunt pointed at the noisy crowd and rambled on. "Today is the great wedding day of the Marquis of Wuan's heir and Princess Changle. When the bridal sedan chair comes by, they'll throw out lucky money, and we all want to share in the noble's good fortune. I just came from East Street. The bride's dowry is being carried over, crammed full of everything you can imagine. What do the scholars say? A 10 li long red procession." Yes, exactly that. Just as she spoke, the sound of gongs and drums came from the distance. The noise grew closer and closer, mixed with the cheers of the crowd, an uproar of joy and celebration. Leading the procession was the princess's guard of honor, and behind it, 8 burly sedan bearers carried a red bridal sedan chair embroidered with dragons and phoenixes. The most eye-catching thing was not the luxury of the sedan chair, but the handsome bridegroom riding a tall steed beside it. I saw Jiyu Yang at a glance. Joy blazed on his face like the morning sun, brilliant and dazzling. The horse beneath him, draped in bright red silk, seemed to sense its master's elation, holding its head high in triumph. The wedding matchmaker threw handfuls of lucky money to the crowd, and everyone bent down to pick it up. Only I stood there, motionless like an abandoned statue, watching the jubilant wedding procession. In the moment Jiyu Yang turned his head, our eyes met. The happy smile on his face froze instantly. He glanced instinctively at the sedan chair beside him, and a flash of panic crossed his eyes. Did he think I had come to crash the wedding? I suddenly felt absurdly funny. He too seemed amused by his own thought, and looked up at me, mouthing two words. He said, "Wait for me, wait for him." In his dreams, perhaps his bride would wait for him. His family in the Marquis's mansion would wait for him, but that person would never be me. The wedding procession faded into the distance, and the noisy crowd dispersed like the tide. The aunt who had been watching the fun pressed a copper coin into my hand. "Girl, you didn't get any, did you? Take this, it's lucky money from a noble. Keep it at the bottom of your chest, and everything will go well for you." The copper coin was cold and hard, pressing into my palm until it ached slightly. I forced a smile, thanked the aunt, and slowly climbed back into the carriage. The carriage rumbled to life, heading in the exact opposite direction of the wedding procession. From now on, we would be strangers, worlds apart. I stood before the magnificent palace gates, my heart filled with trepidation. My aunt was already waiting there. She had entered the palace when I was 5. 10 years of the palace's storms and intrigues had left her eyes sharp and cold, tempered by the years. When my parents died, she had even begged a noble for an edict to leave the palace. Coming to hold the funeral for them, at that time, seeing me all alone in the world, she had made the decision for me to serve in the palace, and would come to pick me up on the day of my hair-pinning ceremony. Yes, today was my hair-pinning ceremony, my coming of age. The reason I had stared at that silver hairpin a little longer before was that I needed a hairpin to pin up my hair as an adult. I had thought Jiyu Yang would buy it for me, but it did not matter, I could buy it for myself. My aunt was dressed in her palace robes. When she saw me, a flicker of softness crossed her sharp eyes. She led me into the palace. The imperial city towered above, as if cutting off all ties to my past. I turned my head one last time to look at the road I had come from. Right now, Jiyu Yang was bowing to the princess at their wedding, was he not? Then I wished them a long and happy life together. We entered a narrow room, where the examining maid was already waiting. My aunt slipped a silver piece into the maid's hand, then turned to me, her voice soft and comforting. "You must be examined before entering the palace. Don't be afraid, I will wait for you outside." I nodded, and followed the maid meekly into the room. My aunt did not know that this humiliating examination had already been forced upon me the day before. Thinking of those two maids beside Princess Changle, hatred surged in my heart. They had bullied me wantonly, relying on the princess's power. And I had been powerless to resist, and Jiyu Yang, who had spoken sweet words of affection to me, had not stopped them at all. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a tiny ant, a dispensable toy. My aunt was delighted to see me come out without a tear or a complaint. "Arwan, you are doing well. This is how you must be in the palace. No matter what happens, you must keep your composure, and never reach for what is beyond your grasp." Her words were quite meaningful, and how could I not understand? In this palace, only caution and prudence could secure one's survival. On the way to the wedding, the moment Jiyu Yang saw Zhao Ruan, his heart filled with overwhelming panic. Was Zhao Ruan really going to crash the wedding? This was a marriage granted by the emperor himself, and Princess Changle was the emperor's own niece, of exalted status. If Zhao Ruan did something outrageous, it would not just be him who was implicated, the entire Marquis of Wuan's mansion would be reprimanded. But when he saw the imperial guards surrounding the princess's procession, he could not help but laugh at himself. What did Zhao Ruan think she could do to crash the wedding? She was an orphaned girl, who could not even bear to spend money on a 50 copper silver hairpin. Her most expensive dress was not even as good as the clothes of a servant in his Marquis of Wuan's mansion. The moment she stepped forward to block the sedan chair, someone would drag her away. As he thought about it, Jiyu Yang felt a twinge of pity for Zhao Ruan. After all, he had lied to her first, and the princess had brutally ordered the maid to examine her, stripping her of all dignity. It was only natural for Zhao Ruan to be angry. It did not matter. When he took her into the mansion as a concubine later, when she had a child, He would not send it to the princess's side to be raised, he would let her raise it herself, so mother and child would not be separated. Thinking of how sweet and lovely Zhao Wanwan had been over the past year, Jiyu Yang curved his lips into a smile. He mouthed to her silently, "Wait for me." But Zhao Wanwan did not seem moved, nor did she shed a tear. Once, when he had gotten a small scratch hunting on the mountain, she had worried all night and could not sleep. Why was she still unhappy? Just because he was marrying someone else? But Zhao Wanwan should look at her own status. Did she expect him to marry a penniless peasant girl, and be laughed at by the entire capital? Jiyu Yang felt a flicker of anger. He thought his act of playing the poor hunter had spoiled Zhao Wanwan rotten, making her unruly. The Marquis's mansion was nothing like the outside world. The princess would have to discipline her well, so she would not bring shame to the family in the future. He turned to glance at Zhao Wanwan again, only to see her walk toward a carriage. Where was Zhao Wanwan going? Jiyu Yang's heart suddenly tightened. Hiring a carriage cost a small fortune. Where did Zhao Wanwan get the money? He wanted to go over and ask, but he could not abandon the wedding procession, and could only watch helplessly as Zhao Wanwan's figure grew farther and farther away. During the wedding ceremony, Jiyu Yang's mind was elsewhere. When the master of ceremonies called out in a clear voice, "First bow to heaven and earth," he still stood there in a daze, his eyes empty. When the call came for bow to each other as husband and wife, a sudden sense of suffocation washed over him. As if he was about to lose something of the utmost importance, his heart fluttered with unease, and he stood up before even bowing. Princess Changle had been filled with joy, looking forward to this wedding with all her heart, but now she keenly sensed Jiyu Yang's strangeness, her expression darkening in an instant, anger simmering in her chest. When she reached out to pull Jiyu Yang back, only for him to brush her hand away, Princess Changle suddenly raised her hand and lifted her red veil by herself. She threw the red brocade veil at Jiyu Yang's face and demanded, "Today is our wedding day, a day of great joy. Yet you stand here lost in thought. Could it be that you hold resentment toward me?" This sudden turn of events caused an uproar among the guests. The princess's arrogance was known to all in the capital, but to fly into a rage on her wedding day was undoubtedly a severe humiliation to the Marquis of Wuan's mansion. Jiyu Yang's face turned cold as ice in an instant. "Princess, lifting your own veil is hardly an appropriate act for this occasion." Princess Changle let out a cold snort, every word dripping with arrogance and haughtiness. "I was named a princess the day I was born. My father and the emperor are blood brothers of the same mother. The Empress Dowager often summoned me to the palace when she was alive, and all my imperial brothers yield to me. You are merely the heir of a minor marquis. Being able to marry me is a blessing earned by your ancestors for generations." Humiliated in front of so many people, Jiyu Yang trembled with anger. Pointing a finger at the princess and shouting in rage, "A wife obeys her husband after marriage. Even if you are of the highest nobility, you ought not to be so rude." Princess Changle had always had her own way, and she would not stand for such rebuke. Her almond eyes widened in anger as she retorted loudly, "It was you who was distracted during the wedding ceremony, yet you dare to turn the tables and lecture me. How dare you? You are clearly thinking of someone else. Could it be that woman you saw on the way to fetch the bride? Do you think I saw nothing? Sitting in my sedan chair," she pointed at the maid supporting her at her side, and shot Jiyu Yang a sneering smile. "Someone has already told me everything. On the wedding procession, you dared to exchange glances with another woman. I should have taught her a lesson yesterday." For a moment, the hall fell so silent that a pin dropping could be heard. The Marquis and Marchioness of Wuan turned livid with anger, but bound by the princess's noble status, they could only barely suppress their fury. But Jiyu Yang could bear it no longer. He flung away the red silk ribbon tying them together and turned to storm out. Princess Changle grabbed him tightly, her voice vicious. "What, are you going to find her? If you dare take one step, I will send someone to chop her into pieces and throw her into the mass grave. You even thought of taking her into the mansion as a concubine. You are nothing but a fool dreaming in broad daylight." Jiyu Yang was utterly enraged by her words, his reason snapping in an instant. He raised his hand and slapped the princess hard across the face. Chaos erupted in the hall at once, filled with screams. shouts and curses that rose and fell one after another. 3 months had passed before I heard the news that Princess Changle and the heir of the Marquis of Wuan were seeking a divorce. The winter wind carried a bitter chill, making the silver bells hanging under the corridor tinkle and shiver. At that moment, I was standing beside Aunt Mai, learning how to match clothes and jewelry for the imperial masters and mistresses of the palace. Aunt Mai stopped her work, tapped the little palace maid who had brought the news on the head, and scolded her in a low voice. "That's enough, drop it, do not let the masters hear you, or you will regret it with your tongue." The little maid clutched her head, putting on a pitiful look and begging for mercy. "But Aunt Mai, everyone is talking about it. They say the young Marquis dishonored the princess on purpose. All for a peasant girl." Then she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a mysterious whisper. "I also heard that the young Marquis and the princess have not yet consummated their marriage." The day after the wedding, the young Marquis left the princess behind and rushed off to find that peasant girl, but he could not find her anywhere. When the young Marquis came back, he went crazy, convinced that the princess had harmed her. I lowered my eyes, staring at the embroidered toe of my shoe, my mind wandering for a moment. Jiyu Yang must have heard from Aunt Liu that I had gone to join distant relatives, and rushed to the neighboring county only to find I had never been there. He would never have imagined that I had entered the palace, and naturally, he could not find me anywhere. And just as the princess had threatened to have me killed, Jiyu Yang had naturally blamed my disappearance on her. Jiyu Yang and Princess Changle had a terrible quarrel over me. Both of them had been spoiled since childhood. Used to having their own way, neither would bow down or admit defeat. In the end, the matter reached the emperor's ears, and both were severely reprimanded. Princess Changle was confined to her palace for 3 months and ordered to copy the admonitions for women 100 times. The Marquis of Wuan was reprimanded for his failure to teach his son well. Jiyu Yang, having acted disrespectfully in the emperor's presence, was flogged 10 times with the court rod. Everyone thought the trouble would end there, but Princess Changle had never suffered such humiliation in her life. While the Marquis of Wuan was at court, she led her people into the courtyard where Jiyu Yang was recovering from his injuries, and poured wine and salt onto his unhealed wounds. Racked with agony, Jiyu Yang struggled free from his restraints and grabbed whatever he could find to hurl at them. A broken jade rui scepter sliced across Princess Changle's forehead, not by an inch. Blood gushed forth, leaving a deep, ugly scar on her forehead. The Marquis of Wuan flew into a rage, claiming he had married a wicked wife and begging the emperor to uphold justice for his son. Prince Yu was also furious, shouting that Jiyu Yang had ruined his precious daughter, who was like a pearl in his palm. Both sides clung to their own versions of the truth, and the dispute escalated into an irreconcilable mess. After the little palace maid left, Aunt Mai glanced at me and said only coldly, "Just listen to these rumors and let them pass. In our Imperial Embroidery Bureau, the only thing that matters is doing our work well." I knew she was taking the trouble to warn me for my aunt's sake, and I thanked her profusely. From that day on, I threw myself wholeheartedly into my work at the Imperial Embroidery Bureau. I rose before dawn every day to check the new fabrics in the treasury, then matched head ornaments and jewelry according to the different preferences of each master and the occasion of the day. My diligence earned me the appreciation of the imperial noble consort, who assisted the empress in managing the 6 palaces. I was often summoned to her palace to receive rewards. I thought life would go on like this, calm and uneventful. One day, after paying my respects to the imperial noble consort, I walked side by side with my aunt out of her palace. A white figure stepped in front of me, and a pair of cold eyes bore into my face, forcing me to lift my head. There stood Princess Changle, her almond eyes wide open, staring at me with utter disbelief. A chill ran down my spine, and I bowed my head. Trying to walk past her, I wanted no more part in the troubles between the princess and Jiyu Yang, but I knew, with the princess's arrogance, she would never let me go once she saw me. Unexpectedly, the princess did not speak. She narrowed her eyes, looking up and down at my face, which resembled my aunt's. She let out a cold laugh and turned to leave. I felt as if I had fallen into an ice cave, a terrible premonition settling in my heart. when my aunt was dragged out of the Marquis's mansion. She was on the verge of death, her breath a mere wisp, her face was covered in ugly bruises, and her left leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Princess Changle had crippled my aunt's leg. My heart ached with an unbearable pain, and I threw myself beside her without a second thought, sobbing softly, "Aunt, aunt, it's the princess, it's all my fault, I've brought this on you." My aunt slowly lifted her eyelids, and when she saw it was me, she forced down her weakness and squeezed out a few words. "Don't worry, I'm fine." With that, she slipped back into unconsciousness. I knew full well this was the princess's revenge. From the resemblance between my face and my aunt's, she had investigated and uncovered my aunt's identity, and what was most terrifying was this: she did not torment me directly, but found an excuse to drag the innocent my aunt to the Marquis's mansion and torture her relentlessly. My aunt's broken leg was merely a warning. Earlier, with the Emperor's intervention, the uproar caused by Princess Changle and Jiyu Yang had finally been settled with a reluctant reconciliation. On his father's orders, Jiyu Yang had bowed his head and apologized to the princess. Jiyu Yang never mentioned the peasant girl again, and the princess had one of her personal maids formally made a concubine and sent her to Jiyu Yang as a bed servant. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, thinking this would be a happy ending for all, but both were proud by nature, and frictions were inevitable when they lived together day and night. The Marquis's mansion needed a dignified and steady mistress, but Princess Changle could not bear to be confined to the mansion all day. She considered herself of the highest nobility, and refused to learn the house rules from the Marchioness of Wuan. The Marchioness was deeply displeased. A few days later, the princess snuck out again to drink and gallop on horseback with the young nobles she had once been close to. Sometimes she returned home dead drunk at night, even vomiting all over Jiyu Yang. Jiyu Yang could not endure this forever, and the two quarreled fiercely once more. Jiyu Yang brought up old grievances, shouting accusations. "It's all your jealousy, you could not tolerate a Ruan, and now I have not a single person by my side who truly cares for me. Sending your maid to me was nothing but a trick to keep an eye on me." It was the one thing Princess Changle could not bear, Jiyu Yang dragging me into every quarrel to compare me to her. How could I, a poor, orphaned peasant girl, be worthy of being compared to her, a princess of royal blood with an exalted status? Seeing me in the palace, she had finally learned the truth. I had entered the palace, living so close to her, and she had countless ways to torment me. Little by little, my aunt's broken leg was only the beginning. My aunt and I were of lowly status. Even if we took the matter to the Emperor, there was no guarantee he would uphold justice for us. How could I sit back and wait for my doom? I gave all the silver I had saved to a little palace maid, telling her to hurry and fetch the imperial physician we were acquainted with to treat my aunt's leg wound. As for me, I returned to my quarters and rummaged through every box and cabinet, finally finding that silver hairpin from all those months ago. I carefully hid the silver hairpin among the Emperor's New Year's Eve gifts and sent it to the Marquis of Wuan's mansion. The chief eunuch in charge of delivering the imperial gifts was my aunt's sworn female companion in the palace. When he saw me, he curled his lips into a soft, sinister smile. "You are such a thoughtful child. No wonder your aunt thinks of you always. Rest assured, with this old slave here, the Marquis of Wuan's mansion shall never know a moment of peace again." Before the evening meal, word came back to me. When Jiyu Yang returned to the mansion, he went straight to find Princess Changle, only to see her frowning as she stared intently at a silver hairpin in her hand. The moment Jiyu Yang saw the hairpin clearly, his eyes turned red with rage in an instant. He rushed forward suddenly, snatched the hairpin from her hand in one violent move, and roared, "You keep swearing you never harmed a Ruan, then how do you explain this hairpin? How did it end up in your hands? I should have known you'd never let her go when you forced that examination on her. You said a Ruan must have run off with another man, and I foolishly believed your lies. I even felt guilty for being distracted on our wedding day. Li Changle, you are truly ruthless to the bone." The sudden accusation made Princess Changle fly into a towering rage. She snatched the hairpin back and smashed it violently to the ground, screaming, "What even is this worthless trinket? I did no such thing. Why should I admit to it? If you trust me so little, Why did you beg to marry me in the first place? That peasant girl is in the palace now, are you still carrying on with her in secret? Their argument grew more and more heated, and they nearly came to blows. Thankfully, the maids by the princess's side rushed over to intervene, explaining to Jiyu Yang that the hairpin had come with the imperial gifts from the palace. Jiyu Yang ground his teeth, roaring in a low, furious voice, "Imperial gifts? Princess, do you have any idea how much this hairpin costs? 50 copper coins. It only costs 50 copper coins. Would the palace send a princess a silver hairpin worth a mere 50 copper coins? Naturally." Princess Changle refused to believe him, retorting loudly, "I told you, the peasant girl is in the palace, she must have sent this hairpin to frame me. If you don't believe me, fetch the eunuch who delivered the gifts and confront him face to face." The chief eunuch trotted forward with small, quick steps, bowed to the princess and the young marquis, then flicked his fly whisk. He wore a perfectly humble smile on his face. This slave has never laid eyes on this hairpin before. He cast a sidelong glance at the princess, who was screaming curses at him. Then calmly pulled a list of the imperial gifts from his arms and held it out to Jiyu Yang with both hands. "Your lordship, please inspect it. All imperial gifts are recorded in the archives." His Majesty also ordered that since Her Highness the Princess is of such exalted status, the finest treasures be given to her first. Jiyu Yang waved a hand, ordering the gifts to be brought out one and all, and checked them against the list with meticulous care. When he finished, his face was ashen with rage. He slammed the list to the ground with a sharp crack. "Li Changle, do you know what I hate most about you? You are born into the highest nobility, adored by all, and yet you lie so easily, and refuse to admit your mistakes, no matter what. And what of your claim that a Ruan is in the palace? She has no family, no connections, how could she possibly enter the palace? Earlier you said she eloped with another man, and now you say she's in the palace. Listen to yourself, what word of this is true? You are so unreasonable, there is no point in speaking with you." Never had Princess Changle been so wronged. Since their wedding, Jiyu Yang had challenged her bottom line time and again for a lowborn peasant girl. Blinded by rage, she raised her hand, pulled a golden hairpin from her head, and drove it straight into Jiyu Yang's chest with all her strength. A dull thud rang out. Jiyu Yang's eyes bulged wide in shock. He stared at her in disbelief, his hands flying to his wound instinctively. His body swayed, then crumpled to the ground like a broken kite. Warm blood spurted all over Princess Changle's face. She finally came to her senses, letting out a terrified shriek. Her hand went limp, and the blood-stained golden hairpin clattered to the floor. The princess stumbled back, her eyes filled with panic and fear. In an instant, the Marquis of Wuan's mansion descended into utter chaos. I sat quietly by my aunt's sickbed, gently blowing on the millet kanji in my hand, and fed it to her spoon by spoon. The imperial physician we had fetched was truly a master of his craft. With peace and rest, my aunt would recover. After she finished eating, I slowly knelt on the ground and told her the entire story, every detail laid bare. My aunt's expression turned grave. She let out a long, helpless sigh. "In the eyes of these nobles, the lives of servants are worth less than nothing, but you took far too great a risk this time. The princess has been holding back from exposing your identity because she wanted to toy with you. Now that she's ready to fight you to the death, your place in the palace will never be a secret again. How do you think the Marquis of Wuan and Prince Yu will ever let you go?" My heart tightened slightly, but I nodded firmly. I could not care less about the lies of the young Marquis or the humiliation of the princess, but they should never have hurt you, aunt, never. I know I acted recklessly, but you are the only family I have left in this world. My aunt looked at me silently for a long time, her gaze soft yet complicated. "My dear Erwan, sincerity is rare in the palace. How could I ever blame you?" She glanced out the window. The sky had long since turned dark, and the cold wind howled outside. Her voice dropped, turning cold and sharp. "They see our lives as insignificant as ants, but do ants never fight back?" A few days ago, envoys from the northern DI arrived in the capital once more. This is their third time coming to beg for a marriage alliance, and the emperor can no longer refuse. "Tomorrow, you will go to the imperial noble consort's palace, pay her a visit, against all odds, Jiyu Yang survived, thanks to the imperial physician's desperate efforts to save him, but the golden hairpin had struck too deep, piercing his internal organs, even with months of careful recuperation. His body would never be the same, he would remain weak and frail for the rest of his life. When he woke, Jiyu Yang's hatred for Princess Changle knew no bounds. He insisted on a divorce, refusing to back down. The Marquis of Wuan was also unwilling to let the matter rest. He went to the palace time and again, demanding justice from Prince Yu. The emperor flew into a rage, and issued an imperial edict on the spot. Princess Changle was to be sent to a royal nunnery, to spend the rest of her days in prayer and penance for her crimes. Filled with anxiety to protect his daughter, Prince Yu hurried to the palace to beg for mercy. He threw himself to the ground, banging his forehead against the stone, and wept as he spoke of the deep brotherly bond between himself and the emperor, his words earnest and heartfelt. Princess Changle also knelt outside the palace hall, her hair disheveled and her spirit broken, screaming her innocence at the top of her lungs. "Uncle Emperor, please see the truth. The young Marquis of Wuan blames me for harming his beloved, but I am innocent. A few days ago, I saw his beloved in the palace. She is alive and well there. How dare he accuse me of killing her? If you do not believe me, summon the mistress of the Imperial Embroidery Bureau to confront me. You watched me grow up, Uncle Emperor. When have I ever lied to you? I was consumed by anger, and that is why I made such a terrible mistake." She held the silver hairpin high above her head, repeating her grievances over and over again. "Meanwhile, I carried a casket of jewelry gifted by the emperor into the imperial noble consort's palace. Before I could even kneel to pay my respects, a teacup smashed to the ground at my feet." The imperial noble consort's voice rang out, thick with unbridled rage. "A marriage alliance? How could he bear to send Xiao Wu away to the northern Di? She is my only child. I fought tooth and nail to save her from the virtuous consort all those years ago, nearly dying in the process. Whoever dares to lay a finger on her, even if it costs me my life, I will make them pay." The entire court was abuzz with talk of the marriage alliance. The fifth princess, the imperial noble consort's daughter, was the only princess of marriageable age in the palace, and the consort had once saved the emperor's life. For all these years, she had never asked for anything, not even the empress's throne. Her only wish was for the fifth princess to live a safe, peaceful life. When she heard that the nobles, led by the Marquis of Wuan, were pressing the emperor to send the fifth princess to the northern Di for the alliance, the consort was consumed by panic. She knelt outside the emperor's study, braving the heavy snow, and the emperor was so furious he refused to hold court for 2 whole days. Though the emperor had scolded the consort for her lack of foresight, he had also grown to resent the Marquis of Wuan deeply. "Your Highness," the head maid by the consort's side cut her off at once, glanced at me, and whispered a reminder, "There is someone else present. Word of this will spread, and it will do you no good." The imperial noble consort finally realized she had lost her composure. She reined in her anger, ordered the maids to take the casket from my hands, then waved me away impatiently, signaling for me to leave. I remained on my knees, not moving an inch, and spoke in a soft, quiet voice. "This slave has a plan, Your Highness. Perhaps it can resolve your troubles for you." 3 days later, 2 imperial edicts from the emperor fell like boulders into a calm lake, sending ripples across the entire court. First, the emperor granted the divorce between Jiyu Yang, young Marquis of Wuan, and Princess Changle. The pair, once hailed as a match made in heaven, later lamented as a couple doomed to misery, had their bond severed forever. Second, Princess Changle was promoted to Princess Changle of the first rank, and ordered to travel to the northern Di to form the marriage alliance. The moment the edicts were issued, the capital was shrouded in an undercurrent of tension and unrest. The emperor even singled out the Marquis of Wuan in the imperial court. "Changle stabbed your son, and you harbor resentment toward me for not being impartial. Now, you are the loudest voice pushing for this marriage alliance, so I shall send Changle to the northern Di. Are you satisfied now?" His words struck the Marquis of Wuan like a 1,000-pound hammer. The Marquis's face turned ashen with shock. He kowtowed repeatedly, his head banging against the ground, his voice urgent and terrified. "Your Majesty is wise. This subject never intended for this." When he finally rose to his feet, his eyes met Prince Yu's, whose eyes were bloodshot with rage. He knew then that what had once been a bond between two great families had turned into an irreconcilable hatred. The following year, Prince Yu recommended the Marquis of Wuan to lead the imperial army against the northern Di. "Our great dynasty's soldiers are strong and our horses are swift. Every warrior harbors a loyal heart to serve the country, and they fight without fear. Why must a princess be sent to form a marriage alliance?" Every year, the Marquis of Wuan submits memorials begging for grain and military pay. "We raise an army for 1,000 days to use it for one critical moment, and this is that moment. Let your Majesty and all your ministers see the true strength of the army we have spent so much grain and gold to raise." His voice echoed through the empty palace hall, firm and resounding. Every word was laced with boundless anger and unwillingness. The Marquis of Wuan knew he could not refuse. So he petitioned the emperor to send Prince Yu as the military supervisor to accompany the army. Word of the expedition reached the harem on the day my aunt was celebrating my birthday. She set a bowl of steaming long-life noodles before me. Wispy tendrils of steam rose into the air, and for a moment, my thoughts drifted back to the day I first met Jiyu Yang. It had also been my birthday. I had pulled out my coin jar with joy, counted the copper coins over and over, and taken out 10 to buy a slice of meat from the butcher's shop. To celebrate my birthday by myself, I never could have imagined it was all an elaborate hoax, staged just for me. The steam blurred my eyes. The days before I entered the palace felt like they were shrouded in a thick mist, far away, as if they belonged to a past life. Seeing me fall silent for so long, my aunt thought I was still worrying about the silver hairpin, and began to speak of the expedition. "The Marquis of Wuan knows he cannot escape this battle, and so he is dragging Prince Yu down with him. If they are defeated, the emperor will punish them both. If by some miracle they win, the imperial noble consort will take the fall for it all." I nodded, and ate the noodles in the bowl in one go. The war against the northern Di raged for 3 long years, and ended in a costly victory. Both the Marquis of Wuan and Prince Yu were gravely wounded. Prince Yu was shot by an arrow, and barely survived. The Marquis of Wuan fared even worse. His arm was cut off in battle. On the day the imperial army returned in triumph, they brought Princess Changle back with them. Once the two armies clashed, Princess Changle, who had been treated with great courtesy in the northern Di, was instantly reduced to a prisoner of war and subjected to unspeakable torment. Her body was covered in scars, old and new crisscrossing her skin. And her mind had frayed too. She drifted in and out of sanity, lucid one moment, hysterical the next. Prince Yu, his body racked by illness, forced himself to his knees in the imperial hall. My daughter Changle went to the northern Di for the great righteousness of the dynasty. To form a marriage alliance, she has rendered meritorious service to the state. Her miserable fate today is all the fault of the Marquis of Wuan, whose incompetent leadership led the army to defeat. I beg your Majesty, in recognition of Changle's wholehearted loyalty, to bestow a marriage upon her and the young Marquis Jiyu once more." An uproar erupted across the court. No one could have imagined that Prince Yu, who hated Jiyu Yang bitterly, would still seek to marry his daughter to him. Yet some heard Prince Yu seizing the Marquis of Wuan by the collar in a rage after the court session, his voice venomous. "My daughter is broken, and your son shall not escape unharmed either." The Marquis of Wuan, now an amputee, could no longer take the battlefield, his former majesty all but gone. The emperor took the opportunity to strip him of his military power, granting him only the empty title of Duke of Wu as consolation. Then, acceding to Prince Yu's plea, he bestowed a marriage between Princess Changle and Jiyu Yang once again. I saw Jiyu Yang for the first time in years on the second day of his wedding, when he and Princess Changle came to the palace to offer their thanks. The once spirited young Marquis, who had ridden in fine robes on a fiery steed, was now gaunt as paper, his face haggard and drawn. He stumbled every few steps, forced to stop and gasp for breath. His eyes were cast down, his vacant gaze fixed on the ground, his thoughts a mystery. Princess Changle at his side was even more emaciated than he. Her once soft, round cheeks were now marred by jagged, hideous scars. The emperor did not receive them in person. Commanding the imperial noble consort to bestow the imperial gifts in his stead, by then, I had become the consort's most trusted senior maid. I held the gift tray steady and stepped forward. Princess Changle did not seem to recognize me. Her mind was fractured beyond repair. She muttered to herself under her breath every now and then, paying no heed to anyone who spoke to her. She ignored Jiyu Yang standing beside her, as if the two were strangers who shared no bond. Jiyu Yang, too, appeared indifferent, reaching out to take the gifts meant for him. But the moment he lifted his head, our eyes met. Jiyu Yang's eyes flew wide, shock and disbelief racked his entire body, and he stumbled back 2 steps instinctively. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he forced out the single syllable, his voice raw and hoarse. "Young Marquis Jiyu." I cut him off sharply before he could say more. "Her Highness awaits." The Marquis ought to offer his thanks. My tone was cold and distant, as if we had never crossed paths at all. Jiyu Yang only stared at me, dumbfounded, rooted to the spot. The imperial noble consort paid no mind to his breach of etiquette, ordering me to escort Jiyu Yang out of the palace. The palace path stretched long and narrow, just as it had all those years ago. At the palace gate, Jiyu Yang called out to me as I turned to leave, trembling. He pulled the silver hairpin from his bosom, holding it as if it were a priceless treasure. All these years, I have never stopped thinking of you." I turned slowly, curving my lips into a perfect, measured smile, my voice calm yet unyielding. "But I have never once thought of a man who lied to me." Snowflakes drifted down softly, the cold wind carrying away Jiyu Yang's broken sobs. I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong." His voice echoed through the snow, thin and helpless. A wail of despair. I lifted my eyes and saw my aunt standing not far away. I hurried toward her, the last trace of darkness in my heart vanishing in an instant, leaving only profound peace behind.